Boomer in Recovery.
You're listening to Boomer in Recovery, the podcast about mental health and addiction recovery from a boomer's perspective. And here is your host, Cecil.
I don't think most men from my generation were taught not to have feelings. I think we were taught not to show them. There's a difference, a big difference. Because feelings don't just disappear because we ignore them. They don't vanish because we stay busy. They don't go away because we go to work, mow the lawn, pay bills, or just keep moving. They just go underground. And eventually, what stays buried long enough usually finds another way out. Sometimes it comes out as anger, isolation, addiction, and sometimes it can come out as men sitting quietly in a room wondering why he feels disconnected from everybody around him. Today, I want to talk about men who never learned how to talk about feelings, because I think there's a lot more of us than people realize. Let's start with the obvious. Most of us weren't handed an emotional vocabulary growing up. We heard things like be tough, walk it off, quit crying, man up, handle your business. Now, to be fair, our parents weren't trying to hurt us. Many of them grew up during difficult times, war, economic hardship, survival. They taught what they knew: strength, responsibility, sacrifice, and those are good values. I still believe in them. But somewhere along the way, many of us learned another lesson too. If you're hurting, keep it to yourself. Here's something I find interesting. Men often don't stop feeling emotions. We simply rename them. Sad becomes tired. Fear, it becomes stress. Anxiety becomes frustration. And grief becomes anger. Loneliness becomes wanting to be left alone. Because anger was acceptable, stress was acceptable, being overwhelmed was acceptable, but sadness, fear, vulnerability, those were harder conversations. So we translated them into emotions we were allowed to have. Hell, I remember seeing a man years ago who everyone described the same way. He's just grumpy. He's always angry. That's just how he is. Then life slowed down enough for him to finally talk. And underneath the anger, there was fear, disappointment, grief. There was a lifetime of carrying things alone. The anger wasn't the problem. The anger was the messenger. Silence costs something, sometimes more than we realize. It costs marriages because our spouses cannot connect with walls. It costs friendships because eventually people stop asking how we're doing when the answer is always fine. It costs fathers' relationships with their children because children learn emotional language from watching us use it. And sometimes it costs us our health. Stress has to go somewhere. Pressure has to go somewhere. Unspoken pain has to go somewhere. The body usually keeps score. I think a lot of men listening to this know exactly what I'm talking about. You go to work, you provide, you solve problems, you become everybody else's support system. And somewhere along the way, you realize something very uncomfortable. You don't know who supports you as a support person. You don't know where your emotions go because nobody ever taught you. This is where addiction enters the conversation. Because substances, they don't ask questions. Alcohol doesn't require vulnerability. And drugs, don't ask us to explain ourselves. For a while, they seem to work. They quiet the noise, they slow the thoughts, they take the edge off. Until eventually, they start asking for more than we can give back. I met a lot of men in recovery who weren't trying to get high. They were trying to get relief. And that's a very different conversation. One man once told me I didn't know how to tell people I was hurting. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was unusual, because it was common. Pain wasn't the problem, language was. One thing I admire about younger generations is this. They're having conversations we never had. Sometimes we roll our eyes. Sometimes we think they're talking too much about feelings. But maybe, just maybe, they're correcting something we missed. That doesn't mean they get everything right. Lord knows every generation has its blind spots. But emotional honesty, that's not weakness. That's a skill. I think we need to redefine strength. Strength isn't pretending you're fine. Strength isn't carrying everything alone. Strength isn't silence. Sometimes strength sounds like I'm struggling. I need help. I'm angry and I don't know why. I'm not okay. Those may be some of the hardest words a man ever says, but they may also be some of the bravest. I've watched men walk into recovery groups looking terrified, not of sobriety, not of treatment, conversation. Talking honestly felt harder than giving up substances. Then something remarkable happens. They started talking, and little by little they realized they weren't broken. They weren't weak, alone. They were human. So where did we go from here? We start small. We check on our friends. We ask better questions. We answer honestly when someone asks how we're doing. We teach our sons and grandsons emotional language we never had. We show them strength and vulnerability can exist in the same person, because they can. They absolutely can. The men who never learned how to talk about feelings are still out there, working, providing, smiling, carrying things quietly. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you love one of them. Maybe you were raised by one. If that's true, I want you to hear this. It's never too late to learn a new language, even emotional language. It's never too late to have conversations that you've avoided for years. And it's never too late to discover that vulnerability and strength were never enemies in the first place. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, you don't have to carry everything alone. We'll talk again soon.